Well, welcome Texas Ministry Conference attendees, and this is a very interesting conference this year. The fact that we're doing it virtually instead of in person there at Champion Forest Church in Houston. And so if you have joined this workshop, Entrusted, what you don't know can hurt you, then you most likely have either been stewarded with taking care of your church facility or have an interest in how to best take care of what God has entrusted to you. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Tim Cool, and I'm with Smart Church Solutions. Some of you know us as Cool Solutions Group. Others of you have used or continue to use our eSpace facility management software. And but let's look at what it means if you don't understand the things that are involved with your facility. So again, Smart Church Solutions, Cool Solutions Group, eSpace, that's who we are. You can learn more about us at smartchurchsolutions.com. So let's get some common languages. Make sure that we're talking the same thing here. We need to be able to agree on some of these premises. So let me just run through some of the common language things that I would hope that we could all agree on. The first one is that a building will never save a soul. The building itself can never be the instrument from which a soul can be saved. Now, what happens in the building is a totally different thing. The second thing that we want to look at is a building will never feed the hungry. Again, it is a great resource for those kind of things, but in and of itself, the building cannot feed the hungry. It requires people. Next, a building will never disciple a believer. So once people have come to a faith in Christ, the building cannot disciple them. Again, it becomes a great tool for that, but you can't let the building be the discipler of people. Next, a building will never have a meaningful conversation. Now, I have written in other blogs and in a book that we put out called Why Church Buildings Matter, that your building will tell a story. It will communicate something to people that drive by, that walk up, that walk in, that go through your facility. It'll communicate a story, but it can never actually have the meaningful conversations that we do as human beings. And a building can and will impact a guest experience. Notice I use the word guest and not visitors, because guests are people that we have planned for and that we would like to come back. This is particularly true for a first-time guest. The condition of your building, the appearance of it, the ease of access from the parking lot to the front door and not 500 front doors. All of these things will impact a guest's first-time experience. And a lack of understanding the condition and operations of your facility will hurt your ministry in the long run. And this is where we're going to focus most of our time today, is understanding this. Too often we think that once we have a building, the building will just take care of itself. We don't need to worry about the condition or how effective or efficient it is from an operations standpoint. But in the long run, if we don't properly take care of our buildings, if we don't properly have operations systems and intentionality, long term, the ministry of the church will suffer. And we'll dig into that a little bit more later. Are you guys all still awake? Okay, just want to make sure. So in my most recent book that we released last year, it's called Entrusted, a guide to intentional church facility stewardship. I love Tony Evans's quote of consequences happen whenever we seek to act as an owner over what God has entrusted to us to steward. We don't own anything. We have been entrusted to take care of God's stuff. Entrusted is a responsibility and not just a word. If you believe, such as I do, that everything on earth belongs to God, that all of the things that we look at, touch, the houses we live in, the cars we drive, the churches we worship in, all belong to God, we have only been asked to be a steward of those things. So they've been entrusted to us. So we're responsible to take care of God's stuff, just to put it in really simple terms. So why is that important? And I want to make sure we don't just skim over that with a head nod and just say, yeah, I get it. it is incredibly important for us to understand that we have a massive responsibility to steward God's thing. The word entrusted is used over 55 times in the New Testament. The word entitled is never used. We have been entrusted to steward God's things. And I think, frankly, we're going to be held accountable for it when we get to heaven. John Wooden had a great quote: "If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over?" Too often churches just assume that they can wait for 10, 20, 30 years before they start taking care of their building. Well, if you didn't have the time and resources to take care of it for the last 10, 20, 30 years, how do you expect to have the time and money, resources to now take care of it in a condition that's going to be far worse than what it was at the time that maybe the building was first built or recently renovated? These are critical things that we need to understand as church facility stewards. So the first place we have to start is with facing reality. Too often churches want to stick their head in the sand and just assume that the buildings are okay. You know, the roof isn't leaking, so the roof must be okay. That's as far from the truth as can be. And the air conditioning is still working, so everything must be okay. We have to face reality. And so that starts with knowing the facts. What are the facts of how much does it cost to operate our building? How much does it cost to heat and cool our building? How much does it cost to take care of the janitorial? Do we have deferred maintenance? What's the life cycle of the different components of our building? If we don't start with the facts and be willing to face the realities of those facts, then we're just kidding ourselves. So on our website at Smart Church Solutions, we wrote a ebook called The 4 Buckets of Church Facility Budgeting. We're going to hit some of those highlights here today in this workshop. We're going to expand on that with some other data that we have obtained in 2020. And what a year 2020 has been. You know, the one blessing of doing this conference virtually is I don't have to wear one of those goofy face masks. I am just so over it. Anyway, sorry did I divert. So the 4 buckets of church facility budgeting, we're going to hit on those and we're going to drill down into these in a little bit more detail. The other thing we're going to look at is benchmarking. Benchmarking is simply an evaluation or checking on something by comparison with a standard. And we spent a great deal of time in 2020 doing our second round of church benchmarking studies. Matter of fact, we did a nationwide survey. Our benchmarking report is over 50 pages of questions. We included church facilities from 30,000 square feet to over 200,000. In fact, we had some that were close to 500,000 square feet. The research took over 6 months to assemble. And so as we're looking at the 4 buckets of your budgeting, we're also going to be comparing that to what are we seeing on a national level from a benchmarking standpoint. Some of this is going to be very revealing. If you've never studied this before, if you've never thought about it and compared how your facility operates compared to others, maybe in your community, your state, your denomination, around the country, this is going to be fairly eye-opening for you. So let's start with an overview from our benchmarking report. We looked at combined utilities, custodial staff supplies, maintenance staff and supply costs. We looked at 12-month HVAC service costs, and then a total facility budget with staffing. That's the big one. The $5.54 a square foot is what has been reported. Now, I'm going to explain to you a little bit later as to what we think the correct number should be. But based on our national survey, that's what churches are spending on average, is $5.54 a square foot. If you would take your utility cost, all your janitorial costs, all of your general maintenance costs, not including what you take care of for your grounds, i.e. grass or snow removal. And if you're in Texas, probably very little snow removal unless you're in Amarillo, and they seem to be getting a lot more snow this year. But $5.54 for the building maintenance. So if we move on then, our research actually shows that it should be closer to $6 or $6.50 a square foot. That's what we find the best run facilities functioning at. The ones that seem to have the least amount of deferred maintenance, they seem to have the proper staffing, their janitorial is top notch, they're keeping up with the natural deterioration of the buildings. So $6 to $6.50 is really what we see should be the number. So, $5.54, we're at least 10% to 20% lower from the reported sector to what we believe is the correct amount. So I think we as a church community would agree that we probably have some room for improvement there. When we look at the best practices, the operations numbers we find to be somewhere between $5.25 to $7.50. And that breaks out into utilities between $1 and $1.50, general maintenance $2.50 to $3.50, and janitorial between $1.75 and $2.50. These are all laid out in that ebook on the 4 buckets of church operational budgeting. You can learn more information by getting that free ebook. So when we look again at the operational budgeting, your utilities, if you're under $1 a square foot, you are either the greatest energy saver in the world, or your building's most likely being underutilized. So your utility costs are less. If you're over $1.50, you probably have some significant savings. And generally what we find is that the reason you're over $1.50 is either due to poor behavior, meaning that you leave stuff run all day, all night, or you don't change temperatures, or you have outdated and inefficient systems, or in most cases, it's a combination of the two. Anything over $1.25, you probably have room for improvement. Then you can see what's included in janitorial, from labor, material, paper products, major cleaning, such as your carpet extractions, waxing, and so on. General maintenance, the national average between $2.50 and $3.50 a square foot. We also find that staffing, based on surveys by our firm and also IFMA, and IFMA stands for International Facility Managers Association. This is a group of over 25,000 facility managers, not church-centric, although there are some churches involved in it. This is nationwide. And based on this, you need 1 full-time facility staff employee for every 25 to 35,000 square feet. This is for your general maintenance. This does not include your janitorial. So you need to look at that and see how you compare. So these are good numbers for you to kind of do your own homework and say, okay, where are we at on this spectrum? So let's first look at utilities. Going back to our benchmarking report, our benchmarking showed that the subsets, you can see $1.20 down to a low of 80. What we found with these lower, both in these lower square footage numbers, was that these churches were only open 2-3 days a week. And so their utility costs were much lower. You can see here, some of the larger churches have the worst. And what we found is many of them were not being efficient with the use of their facilities as far as running their air conditioning or their heat. Most segments of the study appear to be funding facility budgets okay. The custodial was somewhere $1.75 to $2.50, maintenance $2.50 to $3.50. You can see here, overall, we're coming in under. We're underfunding our custodial. So if $1.75 to $2.50 is where we should be spending on custodial, there's almost none in our benchmarking pool that were close. Maintenance, again, significantly off. This is concerning because those two things combined will increase the rate of deferred maintenance accumulation. And so again, we don't put these numbers in here of $1.75 to $2.50, as well as the maintenance costs, to just try to spend money. These have been based upon determining what will help a church keep up with the natural rate of deterioration and allow a church to not have to do a massive capital campaign in 20 years just to replace the roof. This would allow you to have the roof maintained on a more regular basis. We looked then at how are you utilizing your time. What we found is with custodial personnel, they're only spending about 65% of their time, what we would call on task. So only 65% of their time was done intentionally doing the tasks that they were assigned. From a maintenance standpoint, only 50%, 51% were actually spent on doing the maintenance tasks that they were hired for. Now, in both of those cases, you could assume that maybe some of their time is being done with setup and tear down. Some of it may be spent in staff meetings or staff chapel. What we generally find, particularly with the maintenance side, is without proper direction, without the utilization of a work order management type of tool, it's easy to flounder in what do I do next. And so approximately 13 hours a week of lost time per FTE for janitorial, and almost 20 hours a week of lost time per FTE. So think about what that would mean for your budget. Between those two, there's potentially 33 hours a week of lost time that you as a staff person are paying for that may not be getting your money's worth out of them. So we need to look at that. When you think of some of the deferred maintenance issues, if we could gain back even half of that 20 hours of lost time, what things might be able to be done on our building that right now aren't being done that would then save us money down the road. Okay, housekeeping and janitorial. Now this is going to be a little bit complicated. We looked at, where do you get your chemicals from? And we looked at from local commercial house supply houses to online orders to local retailers and then to other. The local supply houses seem to be the number one choice, not quite by double, but close from online orders and local retail big box stores. It's interesting, the larger the facility, the more inclined they are to use the commercial supply house. And a lot of this is because they can get products that you can't get at a discount at a local retailer or at online. You may be able to get a cheaper price online, but you may not get the quality that you're looking for. So these are areas that I think we all need to pay attention to and determine where's the best place to get our supplies. We then asked, do you utilize a dilution system? So when we talk about dilution systems, we're talking about the ability to mix your own chemicals. Some churches are using a dilution system that is a wall-mounted, you put a concentrate in it, you take out a certain amount, add water. Other times it's a tablet format or other type of concentrate. Let's talk about the fact that only about half of the respondents use a dilution system. So dilution control of chemicals can save you money, storage space, and it actually promotes green practices. Let's think about this. Instead of having to buy 50 bottles of Windex that comes in a large box that I then have to break down and throw away the box, that a large truck had to deliver, now I have 50 bottles of Windex I have to store someplace with bottles I'm likely going to throw away, which now all of a sudden creates more waste, versus buying a concentrate, using my own bottles over and over again. What are my potential savings there? So as we look at this, about 48% of the churches that were respondents in this could probably save additional money, storage space, and the like by using some kind of dilution system. Again, the type of systems on the left-hand side, the tablets are a great option. The right side, the dilution control, allows you to get better measurements with your own water supply. These are just great options for you to consider as you're looking for ways to be more cost-effective, to reduce your storage requirements. Let's face it, how many of you have enough storage? And then it also helps us take care of our environment. So being a facility steward does not mean we don't want to be an environmental steward as well. We then asked, how important is green? And when we asked this, less than 50% felt that it was important to be green. This was a little frustrating for me because green does not mean that you are a tree hugger. Green just means that you have taken some intentionality into what you're doing for your facility, such as the example I used of not having a large truck deliver a box that then has to be thrown away and bottles that have to be thrown away. Being a green-minded person also could be the fact that you turn off the water when you're not using it. You turn off lights when you don't need it. You put in occupancy sensors so that lights can turn off and on by themselves. Simple things. It doesn't mean you have to go out and hug every tree on your property. So then staffing for cleaning. With the staffing for cleaning, we looked at in-house, outsourced, and volunteer, and then other. And frankly, I don't know what other is. Maybe that just means they don't clean. But in-house and outsourced were pretty close, 65% to 50%. And whenever we are asked, do you guys prefer in-source or outsource cleaning? My answer is always yes. Because we will talk to one church that they think in-house is the only way to go. We have others that only outsourcing. So it becomes a personal preference. And so what this graph shows is that it's about a 50-50 split between in-house and outsourced. The volunteer confused me a little bit when we got this, particularly on the larger size churches, because when you're talking large facilities, they become a little bit more complex. Then maintenance staffing, again, in-house, outsourced, and volunteer. In-house seems to be the largest. That's great. The volunteer seemed to trend higher towards the smaller facilities. That makes perfect sense to us. Again, it doesn't always mean that you're getting the quality that you need, but I understand from a budgetary reason why that is the case. Let's look at HVAC now. So how often are HVAC filters changed? We asked monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. And the quarterly was the most at 55%. And that is in keeping with what we find as being a best practice as well. Monthly doesn't necessarily surprise me. Matter of fact, one of our facility experts, Nathan Parr, told me that when he was at First Baptist Church, Belton, Texas, he would change them monthly because it required he and his staff to actually get into the HVAC units on a monthly basis so they could see if there was anything else going wrong. Too often when you wait quarterly and semi-annually, you're not in the unit as often, and you may not notice that a belt is starting to come loose or that you're getting a squeaky noise or something else. So this, again, is purely personal preference. But quarterly seems to be the trend. And to me, that was clearly encouraging. Nearly 70% changed either monthly or quarterly. And so that means that we're doing a much better job than what we have seen in the past. HVAC control systems. Time clocks were the lowest, and I'm thankful for that because time clocks are not necessarily the most efficient. Non-programmable thermostats was the next lowest. Then the largest was the building automation system at 60%. That doesn't surprise me with the number of chillers and boilers that many mid to large size churches have that need that kind of sophistication. The programmable Wi-Fi thermostats and then the programmable non-Wi-Fi come in at almost 70-some%. That was interesting. Now, the reason those numbers don't add up to 100 is some churches had a combination. They maybe had a HVAC building automation system for part of their building, but then they had thermostats someplace else. So that's why these don't totally add up to 100%, and actually it's closer to 150%. So then we asked, how many hours a week to manage your controls? 50% spend less than an hour a week, which is great. But what we find then is from 1 hour to more than 6 hours, we've got a big disparity there of time that it takes. So think about this. Assume that you pay a staff person $20 an hour, and maybe that's not their hourly rate, maybe that's their total cost. Assume 3 hours a week for 92% of the respondents. That equates to $60 a week, or almost a little over $3,100 annually. And if you're in the higher percentage bracket, it could be, 6 hours a week. So, take that and double it. If you're in that 5 to 6 hours that I showed on the previous slide, if we go back to this slide, and almost 6% of the churches were spending more than 6 hours, and you had almost 12% that were spending between 4 and over 6 hours. Well, that would mean you're spending over $6,000 a year to take care of and control your HVAC system. To me, that is not very efficient, particularly when there are so many options out there to automate those kind of things. We then asked, are your HVAC controls integrated with your event calendar? 25%, almost 25% said yes. 75% said no. This is a tremendous opportunity for increased efficiency, operational effectiveness for your church, to have your HVAC controls actually integrated with your event calendar. I'm going to go back to this just 1 second. Totally self-promoting plug here. If you are an eSpace client, we can integrate our event scheduling software with probably about 80% of church HVAC systems out there. So, and we're finding churches saving anywhere from 15 to 30% on their HVAC cost. Plus, we're reducing their operational costs by requiring less hours to be spent on it. So instead of spending $3,000 to $6,000 a year, you might be down in the $1,000 to $2,000 range. So you're seeing significant savings there, as well as the utility cost savings. So for 76% of the churches that responded, they have a great opportunity to reduce operational costs. So let's just look at some miscellaneous other stuff that came out of our report. So how many churches have an electronic access control? This may be a card reader, key fobs, a punch code, and 79% almost said yes. That's great, because I see that as the ability to get rid of that big janitor's key ring, and it also helps eliminate the lack of security when you give out master keys to every elder, deacon, trustee, and so on and so forth. Having the electronic access control is a much more secure way and an easier way to manage your facility. We then asked, do you back charge ministries for facility use? 81% said no. A little over 10% said yes, and 8% said other. Again, not sure what other means. We asked this only because we have seen a trend in churches in their budgeting cycle starting to look at, okay, if I need to do VBS for a full week, should the cost of that facility portion be charged to children's ministry? And if so, then you need to build that into your children's ministry budget going in. But it allows ministries then to be more intentional with the utilization of the facility, knowing that when they use the facility, there's a potential of being monies coming out of their budget. I'm not promoting it one way or the other. It's just an interesting fact that we've seen a little trend towards. So let's look now at the 4 key types of maintenance management strategies. So the very first type of maintenance is corrective maintenance. This is also called breakdown maintenance, break fix. It is your reactive. There's no escaping this. This is the light bulbs out, the toilet's clogged. There's a spill on aisle 5. These are the things that we have to react to because something has broken. It needs corrected. There's no escaping it, but it can be mitigated. And the way it's mitigated is by proper preventive maintenance, as well as proper logging of when items go into effect and when they need to be replaced. So preventive maintenance, what's referred to as PM, it's the maintenance of the regularly performed items, changing your filters, doing your elevator maintenance on a monthly, quarterly basis, your fire extinguisher maintenance, your backflow preventers, all the things that will help extend the performance of the life longer. Most churches understand corrective because we end up being in a break fix corrective mentality. Preventive maintenance has become more commonly known to churches, and they're taking more advantage of this. Matter of fact, I'd say majority of the churches use preventive maintenance in some form or fashion. The next type of maintenance that we're seeing taking the commercial and the non-church markets by storm is what's called predictive maintenance. Predictive maintenance is utilizing sensors and other devices. We live in a world of Internet of Things. If you have a Echo, Amazon Echo, or a Google Play, or you have some other device at home that you tell it to play music, or you have Siri on your iPhone, that is all IoT, Internet of Things. It's things telling things what to do. Predictive maintenance has become popular with the birthing of the Internet of Things, because now there are sensors that you can put in place to determine defects prior to them actually going bad. For example, you can put a motion and a vibration sensor in an air conditioning unit, and if that unit starts to wobble, if the fan starts to fluctuate and you start getting variation in the motor, then that sensor will pick up on that, and it can notify you that, hey, someone needs to check on this. So it's not routine preventive maintenance, but it's giving you a heads up that, hey, something's going wrong with this. You need to check it. Well, in many cases, that check can now extend the life of the unit even further for very little cost, if any cost at all. And so then now you have saved yourself the headache of downtime. You've saved your church the cost of costly repairs. So just be on the lookout for predictive maintenance being something more and more churches will be taking advantage of. The last type of maintenance, and I say this tongue in cheek, is deferred maintenance. This is the run, Forrest, run. This is the kind of maintenance that you should not have. We encourage you to do everything you can from corrective, predictive, and preventive maintenance to avoid deferred maintenance, because deferred maintenance is a killer. So let's look at what deferred maintenance is. And that is our second bucket. It's the practice of postponing maintenance activities. It's putting off for tomorrow what should be done today. And in most cases, when you put off maintenance and it becomes deferred, it costs significantly more to take care of it down the road than it would have at its first point of failure. A couple of quotes from studies that we have found. One, it says that for every $1 in deferred maintenance cost, $4 of capital renewals is needed in the future. The one below it is even more shocking, that if a necessary repair is deferred and allowed to remain in service until the next level of failure, the resultant expense will be 30 times the early intervention costs. I'll give you a prime example. If you have a window whose caulking has come loose and you don't repair it, that cost might have been $50, $75 to fix it, maybe less. If you let it go until the next level of failure, which might be you getting black spots on your drywall, it could cost you at least 30 times more to fix that, because now you're repairing drywall, you may be replacing rotted wood, insulation, and so on and so forth, for something that could have cost pennies compared to what now it's going to cost you to do. Every one of these pictures is a picture from a church that we have done a facility condition assessment for. These are real churches, and you start looking at the kind of deferred maintenance. The one in the bottom middle is my favorite. This is a church down in Louisiana that decided in their wisdom that they would just roof over an air conditioning unit that was no longer working. And while that is an extreme, look at the bottom right-hand picture. What's going to happen eventually? Where's that water that's puddling going to go? Eventually, it's going to get under the sidewalk. It's going to get underneath the foundation of that column. And then you're going to be spending thousands of dollars in repairs, where if you put a little piece of black corrugated pipe and redirected the water, or at the very least, put a splash block and redirect the water. These are the kind of things that, if unaddressed, become significant costs down the road. So the NEA, the National Education Association, which is the teachers union, they did a survey and a report showing that in order to modernize and take care of deferred maintenance, they were going to have to spend $322 billion. And to totally modernize the schools, the U.S. Green Building Council said it was going to be $542 billion. Those are big numbers. And that's a public schools are entitlements. They get tax dollars, and there's only about 100,000 schools across the country. There's 350,000 churches. Granted, there may be a size disparity, but let's just assume that the 350,000 churches have the same square footage as the school systems. Well, if we have $300 to $500 billion of deferred maintenance in our church facilities, that's not being a very good steward. So I mentioned earlier that we do facility condition assessments. This is an example of a deferred maintenance snapshot of just one of the churches that we've worked with. And if you start adding these up, it becomes tens and hundreds, and in many cases, millions of dollars of deferred maintenance that churches have. And we have, unfortunately, particularly as we've come through COVID this past year and now into 2021, we have seen COVID as an accelerator of deferred maintenance and even total church shutdown, where the maintenance has gotten so bad they can't afford to keep the doors open anymore. So capital reserves is the third bucket that we want to look at. This is where we just have to face the inevitable. Capital reserves are not a if, but a when and how much equation. I guarantee you every air conditioner in your building will be replaced. Every stitch of carpet will be replaced. All of your roofing, all of your parking will be replaced at some point in time. It's inevitable. So why aren't we better planners for the inevitable? So let me give you 3 facts. Fact number 1, all buildings deteriorate at an annual rate of 1% to 4%. This is not just church buildings. This is all built buildings, hospitals, shopping centers, even our houses. Because of that rate, nearly every physical component of your facility will be replaced or have major overhaul. Granted, your footings, your columns, your steel, concrete, some of that may never be replaced. But I assure you, over the life cycle of your building, all your windows, doors, fascia, soffit, you name it, nearly every component will be replaced at some point in time. And because of that, you have to have dollars, money, greenbacks. We're not talking about the hope of money or the promise of money. This is real dollars that is going to be needed to take care of these things. So think of a capital reserve fund kind of in the terms of a retirement planning for your facility. While your facility may not actually be retired, you will retire components of it. And so think of it like an IRA or a 401k or whatever your retirement plan is maybe at your church. You have to think in those terms. You don't put money in an IRA to spend it that same year. You don't put money in a 401k to spend it next year. You put money in there with a plan of how much that you need in X number of years to take care of your medical needs, your living expenses, and so on. So be thinking about how much money do I need to set aside on an annual basis in order for in 10 years to replace my air conditioning units, or in 20 years to repair my roof. These are the type of thinking that we need to do as facility stewards. So from our benchmarking, we asked, do you fund a capital reserve account? Well, I was incredibly encouraged to see almost 79% say yes. That was very encouraging. Then we asked the next question: how do you fund the capital reserves? And part of it was based on project need. Part of it was based on desired amount that they wanted it to be, based on what they could afford, percentage of gross receipts, and so on and so forth. However, 60% of all the respondents do not have a defensible plan. It's a what we feel, it's what we think we can afford, and so on. That is not a good approach to retirement. That's not a good approach to stewardship. It is a guessing game if it's not defensible. I recently, because I'm getting closer to an age where I have to be thinking about retirement. I'm still only 20 in my mind, but my financial planner said, Tim, build a budget of what you will think you will need to live on in 10 to 15 years. Think about what kind of inflation will impact that over that period of time. And then determine how much money will you need to set aside every month, every year for the next 10 to 15 years. And I wish I would have done this when I was in my 20s. The number would have been much smaller. How much do I need to set aside in order to have money set aside to generate the income that I need without eating into my principal amount? That's the same kind of planning that we need to do for our capital reserves for our churches. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so your life cycle planning has to be something that you can measure in order to be able to manage. So we developed a free tool. If you go to eSpace, which is on the smartchurchsolutions.com website, you go to software, you go to eSpace, you'll see something called a life cycle calculator. This is totally free. So there's no excuses not to have this. But this allows you to use this free tool to then project out different items. When does it need to be done? How many years out are we going to need to be saving before we think we're going to have to replace it? What level of inflation do I need to add into this? Just think about all the different things. And life cycle is not just HVAC, roofing, parking. Think about AV equipment, computers, vehicles. Everything that you have in your facility has a life cycle to it. So how are you going to properly plan for it? Again, what you don't know will hurt you. And so if you don't know how much money you're going to need over the next 10, 20 years, it will eventually hurt you. And if you have to borrow money to cover those costs that you should have been saving for, it will hurt your ministry, because now you're taking money away from ministry in order to now pay back debt or to pay for a very, very large facility expense. When we look at the total cost of owning a building, over 71% of it is the cost of operations. And yet we spend such little time understanding what it costs. We don't face the facts of what it costs to operate a building and to build capital reserves. We need to be more intentional with all of those efforts. So then the fourth bucket is your capital projects. These would be things such as renovations, additions, new construction, and repurposing. Those need to be a separate bucket from the other three buckets. In a best case scenario, though, you notice there's only three buckets, not four. The perfect world scenario is operations, your capital reserves, or what's referred to as CapEx, and projects. The bucket missing here is the deferred maintenance bucket. So in a perfect world, you would budget enough money in your operations to keep the building functioning at its intended operations. You would have enough money to keep it up with the natural rate of deterioration. You would then have a capital reserve fund that had the money set aside for replacement when the life cycle of that item was done, so that you kept it operational the way you needed it, you avoid deferred maintenance, and at the end of life, you've got money to pay for it to replace it. In a perfect world, we would eliminate deferred maintenance altogether. So again, the four buckets of church facility budgeting, encourage you to download that at smartchurchsolutions.com. churchfacilitymanagementSolutions.com, go to resources, and then go to ebooks. It's free. The benchmarking report is also a free download at, you can either use the URL on the screen there, or you can just go to Smart Church Solutions, go to resources, and then to additional resources and download that. I encourage you to get both and then do some of your own calculations to see how your church measures up. Again, another advertisement for myself. These are just some comments that were from people on the book Entrusted. Again, I encourage you to pick up a copy of that. You can get it on Amazon, either in Kindle or in paperback, but it lays out just some great fundamental thoughts and concepts of how best to steward the facilities that God has entrusted to us. And lastly, we have a Facebook group called Church Facility Management Solutions. We've got about 1,000 members. These are people that, some of them are facility managers, some of them are pastors, some are administrative assistants, trustees, deacons. There's no job title or role at a church that you have to be in order to join. It's totally free. And the interaction with these members has been just mind-boggling to me. They ask each other questions. They give each other great responses on where do you get this product? What are you using for this? How are you cleaning for COVID? How do I best save energy? And so on and so forth. So if you go to facebook.com/groups/church facility management, you'll be able to find that, and you can be able to join for free and join the conversation and glean all sorts of great information. If you need to reach me, my email is tim@smart. I can't even talk anymore. This has been interesting workshop, to say the least. tim@smartchurchsolutions.com. Check out our website. And thank you so much for your time and attention today. And we look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully, Lord willing, in the near future. And have a safe and great 2021. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.